the upside of the next cycle, I think, is tremendous. We haven't had like this structural setup like this going into any other cycle before. I mean, the Bitcoin ETF, especially when it's led by someone like BlackRock, you're talking in the multi-trillions of AUM. And it's not that they're just expecting people to buy the ETF just straight up. They're going to be bundling that ETF into all sorts of structured products that they're offering to their clients, that they're recommending to people as just basic investment theses, etc. So BlackRock ETF is one of these moments where all of a sudden Bitcoin starts to get embedded into the legacy financial system in a way that we've never seen before.
Brandon Green with us today of Bitcoin Magazine and Bitcoin Conference. He's head of the events, Bitcoin Amsterdam, coming up October 12th and 13th. Use code AltcoinDaily, 10% off. Brandon, thank you for being here. You famously think that Bitcoin will hit 10 million to 100 million in the next 10 years in the long term, 1 million in the short term. Explain your Bitcoin investment thesis.
Yeah, so I caused a lot of buzz on the last show about kind of getting into some moon math numbers. So 2033, I would say the top could be somewhere in the 10 to really $100 million range per Bitcoin. At that point, could you be a millionaire holding 0.01 BTC? I think it's totally possible. I would not be surprised.
0.1 BTC?
0.01 BTC.
Holy hell. And the price, the actual prediction of the price you said was 10 million possibly?
Yeah, I think it could go as high as 100 million in one of these bull runs. Totally possible. I think it's important, when you hit some of those really large numbers, to take into account that, there's a debasement of the underlying currency that's really fueling a lot of that run. So, it's not just that you're going to get $100 million and it's worth $100 million like today, but it is, I still think, going to ultimately capture a much larger kind of set of the overall economic activity. And so the value of that Bitcoin, will be much greater, even in real terms, than it is today. So, if you're looking at really what's kind of driving the bullishness right now, I mean, obviously we're exiting the bear market. It's been a brutal one. We've seen a lot of carnage. There's a lot of kind of dead bodies of companies and, people who weren't the best actors, who are kind of floating past. And that's good. It's a cleaning out of the industry, right? There are some majorly bullish underlying sort of themes that are occurring right now. The Bitcoin ETF is one. I'm sure you guys have hammered it quite a bit on the show, but I think it's hard to really quantify just the impact that that'll have, especially when it's led by someone like BlackRock. I mean, you're talking in the multi-trillions of AUM that these guys have. And it's not that they're just expecting people to buy the ETF just straight up. They're going to be bundling that ETF into all sorts of structured products that they're offering to their clients, that they're recommending to people as just basic investment theses, etc. So BlackRock ETF is one of these, not a black swan by any stretch, it's very foreseeable, but it's one of these moments where all of a sudden Bitcoin starts to get embedded into the financial, legacy financial system in a way that we've never seen before. This is going to be like a pre-ETF, post-ETF, how we measure time. That's just one thing that's happening right now. Another thing that's I think continuing to impress me, or I see, continuing to continue is companies owning Bitcoin. So FASB, the accounting standards, right? They have been incredibly difficult to work with if you're a public company trying to own Bitcoin. And the reason is the way that they kind of classify Bitcoin as an asset is that you're not allowed to recognize the gain on Bitcoin until you sell. So anyone who is a company that owns Bitcoin as a public company right now, whatever they bought at, that's what they have to keep the price of Bitcoin on their balance sheet as. And the only way they can recognize any sort of gain is if they actually sell it, which is super stupid. It doesn't make any sense. But it's a big reason why a lot of companies are just saying, all right, we're not going to hold it right now. It's just going to complicate our accounting and make it difficult to really showcase financials to the public. So that getting changed is a huge driver of an entire other swath of investors into Bitcoin, which is companies who are just looking to protect dollar exposure risk, right? And even more than that. So another thread, another thing to continue to watch is, the growing geopolitical instability, the challenge from kind of the BRICS nations, and what that does to countries caught in between, right? So it's not like everyone's going to want to pick one side or the other of kind of some sort of brewing conflict between the US and China. Most countries are going to want to be able to trade and be friends with and have treaties with both sides. So what do you do from a treasury management perspective of a country when your basic kind of treasury asset for the longest time has been US treasuries, but now you have direct conflict between kind of the US government and China? You're going to be looking for a provably neutral treasury asset that you can hold, and you don't have to kind of worry about that getting debased or any sort of changing components of that asset just based on kind of the short-term needs of one of these countries. And so obviously there's gold, but now there's Bitcoin. And I think that Bitcoin is going to play a huge role in any sort of multipolarity that comes into like the geopolitical landscape. So I'm rambling a little bit, but those are three major kind of themes that I see emerging that are just going to continue to grow, especially as we enter this new epoch. Obviously, the Bitcoin halving coming next year, that's going to start the next cycle. And, the upside of the next cycle, I think, is tremendous. We haven't had like this structural setup like this going into any other cycle before. I mean, it's crazy. It's nuts.
Interesting. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Bitcoin gets to $1 million through BlackRock ETFs, other ETFs, company treasuries, a continuation of what MicroStrategy and Tesla did. Also, the next coming Bitcoin halving. And then Bitcoin gets to 10 million to 100 million with, the next 60 plus Bitcoin halvings, the US dollar getting debased, and also kind of like the reserve currency status of the dollar getting upended.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily the reserve currency status of the dollar. Like, I think that there's a world in which there's three currencies. There's the dollar, there's the yuan, and there's Bitcoin. And, people are going to want to use Bitcoin for no other reason than they don't want to pick sides in a growing conflict. And I think that the addressable market of that use case is huge. I mean, it's basically the entire world outside of the US and China, or, any of the specific allies who are going to find themselves on one side or the other of the conflict. I'm not saying it's going to be a war or anything like that, but the economic kind of turmoil is already beginning with the Russia kind of situation. I think it's just going to continue to be a theme for the next decade plus. So I don't think it's necessarily 60 halvings from now that you see some crazy movement in the Bitcoin price towards some of that higher range of what Bitcoin could ultimately be. I think it could come very soon in a matter of 10 years, 20 years, et cetera. But it's not going to happen in a vacuum. It's not like Bitcoin is going to continue to grow at the same pace it has without there being some structural shifts in the way that the world works. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing for Bitcoin. It's why people adopt Bitcoin is no one's forced to, right? They choose it because it has competitive properties that lead people to want to buy it. And I think that those competitive properties are just going to continue to shine.
So you're still sticking to your thought that Bitcoin hits 10 million to 100 million by 2033?
Sure, why not? I mean, I could totally see it. Again, like there would be some sort of fundamental shift in the underlying currency that measures that number, right? But I think it's totally possible. Another quick thing that I've been thinking about on the ETF side of things. So a lot of people are talking about Bitcoin ETF. People with a brokerage can buy Bitcoin, yada, yada, yada. There's going to be a fork of what Bitcoin looks like. There will be legacy financial system approved Bitcoin, right? And then there's going to be pirate Bitcoin. So let's take the pirate Bitcoin out of this, right? These are the people who are going to continue to transact on chain. They're the real, they own their keys, all that kind of stuff, right? Exactly. You like the pirate Bitcoin, right? But there's also going to be this kosher Bitcoin type thing. And what's interesting about this, and why there may even be people like you and me who ultimately use some amount of this kind of approved Bitcoin, is an ETF share that you would own, a Bitcoin ETF share. It'll represent, because it's redeemable, 1-to-1 the underlying Bitcoin. Maybe there'd be some sort of premium or discount based on, the fluctuations of the day and custodial risk and whatever else gets priced into it, but pretty close. But for the first time ever, you would have kind of much higher up the Cantillon ladder access to credit. you would be able to collateralize your shares of a Bitcoin ETF instead of having to sell. And you can use the money from that to speculate further on the price and, lever up on Bitcoin if you wanted to go that route, or simply just, use the asset to fund your daily life and your daily needs, and have cash that doesn't require you to sell any Bitcoin. And the difference between now and what that world looks like is right now, we've just gone through the absolute washing out of any sort of lender in the space, right? And there's plenty of reasons why that occurred. But one of the reasons is that the cost of capital in the Bitcoin and crypto space is incredibly high. And so having the high cost of capital mixed with the volatile asset, mixed with the keen sense of wanting to get returns on the lending side, it was probably like not a sustainable system in the first place, right? But when you go much higher up on that Cantillon ladder and you get to, the BlackRocks of the world, who are basically, right next to the money printers, their cost of capital is much lower. So their ability to lend against, collateralized shares, you're going to get an interest rate that's a ton lower, like a lot lower. And the counterparty risk is going to be much simpler because it's basically, kind of backstopped by the Fed to some extent. So I see that as like another huge trend, that you're going to basically unlock a ton of liquidity for Bitcoin without having to negatively impact the price as people are kind of using Bitcoin in their day-to-day lives. So just another theme that, I've been thinking about that I think enough people aren't talking about.
So that, there's some people saying that the BlackRock ETF, it's good, but it's just one thing. You are here to say that a BlackRock ETF would be a very big deal for the industry.
Very big deal for the industry, for sure. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. Now, it'll come with downsides, right? Like, it'll mean that Bitcoin gets put through the political washing machine that, just hits everything that possibly runs through our financial system. And it's going to be ugly. It's going to be messy. There's going to be tons of downsides. But again, that's also why I would draw the distinction between kind of that Bitcoin and pirate Bitcoin. The ultimate honey badger doesn't care, right? It's Bitcoin, TikTok next block. It's not going to be affected by it. So, users will be fine, but watching kind of our existing institutional apparatuses try and digest what Bitcoin means to everything is going to be a messy process. And BlackRock will be kind of the catalyst for a lot of that carnage to come. And I'm sure there's going to be tons of onerous regulations. I'm sure there's going to be tons of casting Bitcoin in a terrible light, saying that any bad thing that you can possibly say about Bitcoin will be said. But in the end, Bitcoin will survive and everything else will, go away. So, it'll just be a ride.
Guys, if you think Brandon's bullish, smash the like button, share this video with a friend. I mean, I'm sure you're curious to hear what your friends think about, Brandon's thoughts on Bitcoin. And I want to remind everybody that Brandon is here to promote Bitcoin Amsterdam coming up October 12th and 13th. Use code AltcoinDaily, 10% off tickets. Brandon, how is Bitcoin Amsterdam conference similar or different from Bitcoin Miami conference, which I'm familiar with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it is our European event. So most of the folks who go are European. If you haven't kind of met the European Bitcoin community, it's phenomenal. I mean, these are passionate Bitcoiners. A lot of them have been around since, 2013, 2016, like a while. And they're very technical. Like, this is a much more technical, I think, audience than a lot of the American Bitcoiners. It's fun. It's relaxed. You're going to learn a ton if you come to the event. And you're going to meet like some amazing Bitcoiners who have been through it. You can commiserate the bear market with people who are very comfortable with it because they've lived through quite a few of them. So it'll be great. Amsterdam, of course, is a ton of fun just in and of itself. It's a great city. We've got some special surprises, a few announcements in store, some things that'll probably make some headlines. So, it'll be an event to remember for sure.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to going. I'll see you there. I'll see some people from our audience there.
Yeah.
Last couple questions. And we touched on a lot of different things. Besides a BlackRock ETF, this coming cycle, what else are you looking forward to?
Yeah, so we talked about the FASB accounting. We talked about kind of nation state adoption. I would say another big thing is just Well, have you paid attention to this Javier Milei guy in Argentina?
Not sure.
So, so I'm not gonna come out here and say he's definitely gonna become the next president of Argentina,
Oh
but
yeah.
he won the primary as a libertarian candidate, and his platform was to shut down the central bank of Argentina. And now, he says it from the standpoint of dollarize and just use the US dollar, but it's the sentiment leads him to Bitcoin, and he very much loves Bitcoin, and he's talked about it many times. And so I see Argentina as one of these countries. I think I saw a recent stat that Argentina has already surpassed El Salvador in terms of Bitcoin adoption by its citizens. And so, I see just the global south, a lot more of those instances cropping up, tons of user adoption occurring, that's not even top down, just people choosing to use Bitcoin in their daily lives. And yeah, I mean, I think by the end of this next epoch, there will be a billion Bitcoiners on the planet. 1 billion with a B. That's my bold prediction for this epoch.
I love it. Yeah, a continuation of what El Salvador did, different countries, Venezuela. That'd be awesome. I think it's going to happen. My final question, Brandon, is advice to somebody getting into the space now, today. Maybe they've dabbled in crypto a little bit before, but like somebody who wants to really like go harder into Bitcoin and crypto, somebody coming in fresh, what advice would you give a new person?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of advice to give. Number one, and obviously I'm talking my book, but go to a conference, meet people, connect with the industry. If you're trying to truly get into Bitcoin, then you're not going to experience it on Twitter. Like you're not going to, it's not the real experience. Once you meet people face to face, you learn about Bitcoin through, interacting with people. It's just a different level of kind of engaging with Bitcoin. Secondly, I would say consume a lot of educational material. Altcoin Daily, great show. Continue to, watch and listen and learn about everything that's going on in the Bitcoin space because it's changing all the time. Bitcoin Magazine, of course, we also write a lot about it. We do some videos as well. So feel free to check us out. And then the last thing I would say is tinker, right? Don't just, absorb the information and then move on, right? If there's something interesting that's come out, if you've read a lot about Lightning, go get a Lightning wallet, throw some sats in there, play around with it, send them around to your friends, build a website, enact some Bitcoin payments on the website, see what happens. It is not a museum piece. Bitcoin is not a museum piece. It is a technology that you can use every day. And so you should be using it every day, and you should feel comfortable using it every day because it'll ultimately underpin, the future of your everyday life. And the more comfortable with it you get now, the asymmetric upside you will have in terms of opportunities as it's time to onboard the rest of the world.
Oh yeah, and one more thing. I've had some Bitcoin centric people on here over the past year, and it depends who, but like some people say that there's a growing token economy coming for Bitcoin, whether with drive chains, whether with ordinals, many different things. Is that something you're excited about, not excited about, neutral about? What's your take?
Yeah, so I would say that I'm neutral about it, and I'm not riding necessarily the hype train because I haven't seen the use cases yet that really speak to me, and I think like, oh yes, I will use this kind of in my day-to-day life outside of just speculating. That being said, I think that there are a couple reasons that those use cases haven't cropped up. Number one is that there's some regulatory difficulties with it, right? So everyone likes to talk about like tokens and are they securities, right? Well, the reason why that's such a big question is because you're not allowed to create any sort of token that promises an increase in the value of that token or that can do dividends of cash flows of whatever project it represents or can establish like clear governance, right? And so because of those things, it's really hard to make a token worth anything. And so I think most of them aren't, right? But in a world in which some of those restrictions relax or there's some sort of carve out for digital assets in that respect, then yeah, I think that there's actual use cases that can be built out into that economy. And so then the question becomes, all right, well, what's that built on, right? And I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, right? Like I think that Bitcoin has unique properties that make it the best blockchain to use for any sort of payments, but also for kind of a data infrastructure as well. And so, if you want that sort of robust, unfuckwithable, right, data structure, then you should not be using anything other than Bitcoin in my mind. And so that means that there needs to be the tooling available so that when these use cases really do become possible, that people aren't forced to use some other layer one that has trade-offs, right? So that's kind of my opinion. It's not something I think about a ton, but I do think that the incorrect kind of move on the part of Bitcoin is to completely eschew any future possibility that these use cases will become valuable for Bitcoin.
Excellent. You keep things real. That's why we love having you on. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on. Final thoughts for the Altcoin Daily audience, either about yourself, the conference, Bitcoin, anything you like.
Yeah, I hope I see you in Amsterdam. I know I'll see you, Aaron, but we're trying to just build a movement, right? We believe that every single person in the world will ultimately use Bitcoin in their day-to-day lives. That means that we haven't seen anything yet. Bitcoin has just started to get going, and it is truly going to change the way the world works, and it will truly be able to allow anyone with access to the internet the ability to participate in a global financial system. And the more you can just appreciate what that means for humanity, the more bullish you become on Bitcoin, of course, but also the more bullish you become on humanity. And so ultimately, Bitcoin is a bet on humanity. It's a bet on all of us. It's a bet on our ability to build a future that works for generations to come. And so I think it's one of the most important missions you can have right now. I remain ever bullish on it. So hopefully I see you in Amsterdam. We can talk more about it over a beer or over a drink or over some food. Who knows?
And guys, this guy's actually taller in real life than you'd think. I was surprised. But anyways, thanks, Brandon, so much. See you in
So are
Amsterdam.
you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm bullish. All right.